The world is complex, the Bible is complex. Human existence is a tangled ball of experience, perception, and understanding. Ravel is a puzzling word, denoting both a tangling and untangling. This podcast attempts to hold honest conversations in good faith. Some ideas expressed in this podcast will be challenging. Others will be obvious. When a PhD in biblical interpretation and a habitually podcasting man-child discuss matters of society, scripture, and scandal, you get Ravel.
Hey everybody, you are listening to Ravel, and this is your best buddy Basil, and with me, as always, I have the punctual, the persevering, and the very provocative Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates. How's it going, Chris?
It's going well, my friend. It's going very well.
Good.
I'm glad that we're here on time.
A late recording.
We do. I mean, they wouldn't have known if we didn't tell them, but
No.
Cat's out of the bag.
But also, yes, I hear... Just, it's fun for people to understand the relationship between their podcasters. And yes, you are the punctual one. You are clockwork, punctual, every single recording session. And, I like to think in my own clockwork fashion, I'm just, what's a nice way to put this? Reliably late.
I was talking to a friend one time, and they said that you operate on Basil time.
Yeah, Basil time is its own thing.
That is just how it goes. So, listen, it just, we have our strengths, all of us, and we have our weaknesses, and we just have to learn how to work with each other to get through all of it. So,
you know what? This is what I get for when my mother listened to too much Jimmy Buffett while I was in the womb. Just the island time just sunk in. And
island time? Are you an island boy?
I'm an island boy. Come on, keep your pop culture references to a minimum, Chris. This is a very serious theological show.
Yeah.
What if I was one of the island boys?
I've
spent so long podcasting under a pseudonym just so I could protect my awful rap career. Do you think there's something theological to explore with the island boys? We could probably find something.
I think that theology, yes, pervades every area of our life. So it would be a stretch, and I don't know if it would be worth anyone's time, but we could probably do it.
I'm sure. I am almost positive that there is a pastor out there in America somewhere that is using the Island Boys as a sermon illustration in one way or another.
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to the business here. This is a business podcast after all.
Yes.
We are on the back end of our Death of God series, and it has been a lot of fun, lots of ups, lots of downs, lots of laughs, lots of tears. And I don't know if we're any closer to coming to a definitive answer about what the Death of God means. However, we have done just a wonderful amount of exploring the concept, Chris. What do you think?
Yeah. I would say, I guess, perhaps we're closer. I think I mentioned it in the last episode. I definitely have been personally learning and growing. So it's been good for me. It's been fruitful for me. I'm assuming and hoping that it's been fruitful for everyone else listening. But yeah, it's one of those things where, you uncover one stone to find 5 more underneath of it. So yes, I suppose it could continue to go on and we would get no closer. Yeah. But it's been a fun exploration nonetheless.
Perhaps maybe not closer to a definitive answer, but our view, our horizon has widened to include so many other possibilities, which, that's a win. I like that.
It is, yeah, for sure.
Just to be completely transparent with the coming weeks of the podcast for everybody, we are moving into the holiday season. Christmas is right around the corner. Santa Claus is loading his sleigh. Krampus is creeping through the darkness to gobble up all the naughty children, and other pagan references. However, it is also the time where we get to celebrate the birth of the Christ child, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah.
So our recording schedule is going to be a little funky, but we are going to be trying our very hardest to keep the regular posting schedule normal. And that being said, we still have a possible one or two other Death of God episodes, which may or may not end up being sort of released later on, maybe as like addendums or I don't know, bonus episodes, something like that, depending on so many things. So this may not be the last you hear of our exploration of the Death of God, but we'll be doing our best to get episodes out over the next 4 weeks anyways, whether or not they are Death of God related. Okay, I think that's enough housekeeping, right?
Yeah. Isn't there fun stuff to do now? We got
some fun stuff, of course. This is an asked and not answered episode where we have some questions from listeners, and we will be addressing those. But first, let's read a couple reviews because it's so fun. We've had some people leaving wonderful reviews, and as always, I want to encourage every listener to leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. You know, I've mentioned it before. It seems trivial from the listener perspective, but it is super important to us, Chris, not only because it gives us the warm and fuzzies to hear what people think about the show, but it also goes a long way to activating the super secret algorithms in the system. The Deus Ex Machina.
I have to say that I did my own part and left a review. I kind of didn't know how I felt about it.
You left a review for this show?
I did. Yeah, you can.
Chris, you can't say that. You can't say that. The government.
My name is on it.
It is technically illegal.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, see, I thought that it was just like if I was running for president, you know, the presidents always show up and they vote, or the candidates, and they go in and everyone, I wonder who they voted for, and they obviously voted for themselves. So I just figured I would vote for myself.
That's a great point.
Podcast. So I'm just encouraging everybody. I did my part. Have you done yours?
I haven't done my part, but I'm also not seeing your name on the list. Did you use a pseudonym? I see someone else's name on the list. We'll talk about that later.
We'll just see how it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't. No, it should be on there somewhere. But
okay. Well, here's the thing, folks. Yes, the Deus Ex Machina, the algorithms that rule our lives, they base their recommendations largely on the reviews and ratings of listeners like you. And so, you know, it may seem trivial. It may seem like maybe an inconvenience to you. But if every listener, which won't happen, but if every listener left a rating and a review, then it would kick those robots into overdrive, and we would suddenly become, the number one podcast in the world. But if even a fraction of you, dear listeners, leave ratings and reviews, it'll go a long way. It'd be a wonderful little Christmas present for Chris and I. So please do that. Yeah. But speaking of reviews, I've got some to read for you. Some good, some bad, some more on the Santa Claus side of the spectrum, and some, or at least one, on the Krampus side of the spectrum. So,
I mean, Santa Claus has a naughty list, right?
That's true. So, yes, I'll just read a couple of these. It's a fun time. Let's see. Let's start at the top of the list. Joby G gave us a 5-star review. Thank you very much, Joby G. And it says, why not 7 days a week? Really enjoying these conversations about God, pushing the bounds of religious thought. Look at that, Chris. We are pushing the bounds.
Yeah. Well,
Does that make you uncomfortable as an establishment educated theologian?
I don't think so. I think that's what people like to do. I think they like to kind of push the bounds. And, it can be pushing into heresy, or you can just be exploring the fringes of what we already know and things like that. So, yeah, exploration is good. I like the bit about why not 7 days a week? Why not? Do you want to handle that?
Yeah, I would love to handle that because that's complete insanity. That's why. You have a child on the way, and
I do.
I have 3 cats and like 3 other podcasts that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't do it 7 days a week. Not that we wouldn't, but it's it feels nice that it would be accepted anyways. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we may have more content coming soon. But you also did mention my unborn child who...
My unborn child.
Yes,
It's a funny way to put that.
my son. He was doing laps in the womb last night. It was pretty wild. But we have a name. I don't know if now's the time or not. We've been telling all of our friends and family, but...
If not now, when?
Yeah, it's a good point. So, the name of my son, who's yet to be born, will be Simon Christopher. Yeah.
Ooh, Simon Christopher.
Yeah.
That's very fun. I noticed there's no Basil in there, but that's okay. That's okay.
You didn't make the cut.
Didn't make the cut. One of these days, some my colleagues and friends will have so many babies that there will simply not be enough names to avoid Basil any longer. And I'm kind of just playing the math on this one.
I'll tell you this: if I get to 5 children, number 5, whether it's a boy or a girl, will have Basil in it somewhere.
Okay. Oh,
that's a promise.
Okay. There we go. And it's recorded in the permanence that is the internet and podcast audio medium. Well, thank you very much, Chris, and thank you very much, Joby G.
Yes, thank you.
We got a little
7
off track
days a week
there, but that's okay. We had another one here from, how do I say this? IB Ilby. 5 stars, says, blessing. This podcast has been a real blessing. There have been a few breakthroughs in my thinking after a few of these episodes. Grateful. This feels good to hear, huh?
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, I hope they're good breakthroughs, but it's definitely nice to hear that instead of, I am the same and have not grown or learned anything at all from listening to this podcast.
I just need white noise while I do the dishes. I actually really, I do appreciate that. And this is another one of the reasons that we appreciate the engagement, whether it's through reviews or on any one of the YouTube, the videos or the episodes are going up on YouTube now, too. So not getting a whole lot of hits there, but they are there. Some people had asked in the past. We got that rectified, so they're all posting there too. And then even, through the social media, but the comments and the encouragement and stuff, it really is. I mean, it's helpful, and it, continues to fuel our desire to do these things. But I always tell people that my favorite part about teaching in the classroom is that you just have these moments all the time where you're exploring these ideas with people, or you're teaching something that you learned a long time ago that blew your mind, and then you get to share that experience with your students or the people who are listening. And it happens to me every time I teach a class where there will be a moment where you're teaching and you get to this point and you just start to see like these light bulbs going on in people's heads, and they're having these revelations, and it's almost like sometimes jaw-dropping for them, the sorts of things that you're talking about. And what I really appreciate about this review is that they're letting us know they're having those kinds of moments. So it does mean a lot that when we hear that, that's like, wow, this is actually worthwhile. We're not just talking into the ether.
Love it. I love it. Thank you very much, IBLB. Okay, here's one. You're feeling good on those last 2 reviews, Chris, so I brought you this one. This is from me, 1864. And the the rating is 1 star. Technically poor, says me 1864. And it goes like this. The content might be good. I don't know. I can't listen because Basil is eating his microphone and the doctor is talking into his from another room. Not enjoyable. The doctor needs to speak up or volume up or get closer to mic or something. Horrible.
Oh,
Oof,
boy.
Brutal.
Yeah,
Brutal. Me
horrible.
1864. Horrible, he says.
It,
But I think that might be fair. And if I may, I will say, this is a normal thing to happen for new podcasts. I've done many new podcasts, and it always takes, a little bit of practice to get the tech specs down. Every new project comes with its own technical challenges, and it happens. Thank you very much for your concern. Me 1864
constructive criticism
is constructive, and we have taken steps to try to make things better.
Yeah, I wonder if this was not before I upgraded my equipment too that came in. So perhaps
I think it was before. This was a couple months ago. Yes.
I mean, it doesn't explain yours. You eating your mic. I don't know.
Well, when you have a quality professional setup like this, it oftentimes takes a little bit of extra know-how to do the balancing. But we're getting there. We're working on it. I mean, we don't need to give too much of the secret sauce away. But
this guy must be a pro, though.
Well,
Must be a pro.
not. Probably not. Honestly, I find that most of the technical reviews that come through on the internet are usually not from pros. But who knows? Who knows? I'm not trying to throw me 1864 under the bus. But there you go. Okay, let's see. Do you want to do any more, or do you feel sated?
It's your show, buddy. Whatever you want.
My show. This is our show, but on this very topic, we did get a review from Joyful One. 5 stars, plugging away, they say, and says, keep spreading the gospel, brother. Thanks for all your hard work. Great podcast. Really enjoyed the banter between Basil and Chris.
Oh, well.
See, Joyful One enjoys the banter, which is pretty much the sum total of what we've done so far on this episode.
I was going to say, this one, I'm sure, is hitting home. That's good.
Thank you, Joyful One. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's see here. I'm just scrolling through some reviews. We had a very thoughtful one, Chris. A very thoughtful review come in.
We did?
And I want to read it so badly. But in the interest of transparency,
I give my consent.
You consent.
Fine. I do.
Okay, this next review, honestly, my favorite review so far. Well, definitely top 5 review. Comes from Angela Gates. 5 stars, 5 whole stars, says Angela. Gates. That sounds like a familiar name.
May or may not be.
Who do we know?
Married to Angela.
This person has the same name as your wife. Your wife couldn't possibly have done this.
I cannot confirm or deny.
Okay. Well, someone who has the exact name of Chris's wife sent this wonderful review that I enjoyed very much. The combination and complementation of these two voices alone provide for one of the best podcasts I've subscribed to, if not the best. I agree, Angela. Thank you. Their content is relevant, witty, and humble. I particularly love the contrast in opinions coupled with the gentleness and openness to talk about the uncomfortable and unspeakable things. I also really respect and love that this podcast fosters autonomy. There is space here to form your own opinion without a passionate or biased sway in one direction or the other. There are disclaimers and caution about topics that are yet to be proven. Dr. Gates and Basil highlight some very interesting patterns in nature, the economy, legislature, and the Bible. It is a podcast to get you thinking, questioning, and most notably, assessing why we believe certain long-held truths that we hold so dearly. I have enjoyed being challenged to see beyond the horizon, to open up to a fusion of horizons, and I have been thoroughly encouraged to be more open to opposing points of view. Kudos and much thanks. Well, much thanks to you, Angela. And okay,
Thanks, babe.
all jokes, babe. All jokes aside, well, okay, one more joke. It always means a lot to me that my co-hosts' wives approve of my performance, because whether I am inventing this in my mind or it is true in reality, you know, not every wife in the world would approve of, you know, the time and attention and the sort of single-minded, frenetic energy that it takes to regularly put out a podcast, and it certainly is much more fruitful with the support of a spouse. So I will give Angela the credit for that. And also, truly though, one of the most well thought out summations of the show and what we're going for. And I believe her. I do not think that this is simply a contrivance because she is your wife. I appreciated this review very much. So thank you, Angela.
Yeah, no, she could have just as easily just done 5 stars and said, great show. But yeah,
Dr. Chris sounds hot. 5 stars.
That is my dear wife. Very thoughtful. She's all about the words of affirmation. So no shortage of them there. Thank you, dear.
And forgive me for using this moment to shine a spotlight on your love, Angela and Chris. Okay, There you go. That's all for reviews. Thank you very much to everybody who left reviews. And please, if you have not done it, it would mean a lot if you did over there on Apple Podcasts. Okay, I think it's time now that we are, it's only 20 minutes in. Okay, we're fine. You know, I'm used to getting distracted and doing like 45-minute to an hour intros to an episode. Mm-hmm. So I think we're actually doing good.
Yeah. Do we need to thank some people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who are we thanking today?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Do you have it in front of you? I don't have the window pulled up.
Okay.
I'm scrolling.
I feel like I've been talking so much. I was going to give you
the
opportunity.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
So, yes, we have a couple of people to thank who joined the Patreon. You know, we don't push too hard on the support aspect of this show so far. We are strictly on the value for value model, which is if you get any value from what we do, the value that we try so hard to provide, the best way to keep the show going is by putting value back in. It avoids all the sort of problematic aspects of advertising and big data and privacy concerns and, you know, just having your podcasters controlled by the whim of corporate money. You know, it feels good to not have to think about that. Now, I'm also not saying that we will never take corporate money on this show.
I mean, I could, give a review of My Pillow on here every episode for 5 minutes. I'm not opposed to
codes. But today is not that day, folks. But we do have some people to thank. Starting out with the Patreon user W.E. Pray. We Pray, Prae. Who is supporting the show on a monthly basis over on Patreon, and we are so grateful. Thank you very much, W.E. Pray. Also, we have a supporter who is named Lorelei. Lorelei K. Thank you so much for the support as well.
This is her second appearance on the show now.
Yes, Lorelei, very engaged. We appreciate that very much. Thank you. And last but not least, we've had the support of Learbag over on Patreon, and we are very grateful for his support as well. I recognize all 3 of these names, and it means a lot to have them supporting this show also.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And for those who... Now, I have had people reach out. They are particularly people who don't want to engage with Patreon for a number of reasons, and they are waiting for a PayPal account. And once we have some more creative ways to support the show, we'll certainly let everybody know about that. But right now, what is our Patreon link?
Here I am on it right now.
Yep. What does it say?
No, here it comes.
Here it comes.
It is patreon.com/Ravel podcast. No
Easy.
spaces or periods.
Yeah. Patreon.com/Ravel podcast. Easy peasy. And, it means a lot especially in the early phases of podcasts like this. There are costs associated, especially when the listenership goes up and the length of episodes increases. And people who come in on the ground floor and support the show, we're super grateful because they're making it happen.
Yeah. My mom, I went over, love her. She's not, the most tech savvy. And she said, honey, I've been trying to support your podcast, but I just can't. I clicked on this link. And I was like, Mom, it's fine. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Do not discourage your mother from supporting this podcast. You help her find the Patreon.
Patreon.com.
Mrs. Gates, I'm so sorry your son is putting you on blast like this. I will help you. You send an email. I will give you a step-by-step instruction on how to support. If it wasn't for moms supporting podcasts, not a single podcast would ever get off the ground.
Yeah. Well, anyways. So far, I got my wife, my mom on here today. So, if it was nobody else
and
doing
your son
doing it for the fam, and Simon, yes. He hasn't done much to support the show so far, but I trust he will.
That's babies for you, huh?
It is. I should let him listen. I should put headphones on the belly and let him listen to the episodes.
Yes, he needs to learn Uncle Basil's voice early. His first words would be razzle dazzle. Okay, we have to get to the show now. Here we go. We're getting into the meat of it, folks. Of course, this is an asked and not answered episode. I believe it's the third one. And we have a couple of questions here from listeners who had some questions regarding the death of God. And that's what we're here to talk about. Shall I introduce our first question?
Yeah, let's do it.
I forget how this works. Do you read it or do I?
I think you usually have in the past.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to it, but
that's fine. Here I go. Watch me go. This first question comes from Bo in Florida. And the question goes like this. How is it logical that God could die? If all existence is contingent upon God, then wouldn't everything cease to be if God died? If it was only Jesus' human nature that died, then would any sinless man be an acceptable sacrifice to our sin? There's a lot there, isn't there?
There is, yeah. And have to give a shout out. This is a dear friend of mine, Bo Kennedy. He was actually in my youth group many years ago. Met him when he was in 7th grade.
Oh, wow.
And pretty much wanted to strangle him almost every day. But then he grew up and matured and actually became very serious in his relationship with the Lord, went on to Bible college, ended up getting engaged to another girl, Alexa, who was in our youth group. Also, I got to perform their wedding some time ago. And they actually have conceived a male son and have actually the same due date as my wife and I. So we will have children, around the same time. Little Billy will be theirs. But hello, Bo. I know he's listening. So he asked this question, and he and I had discussed it, and he kind of just said he has his ideas about the answer, but he said, I thought this would be really fun for you guys just to talk about. So
I do appreciate that. There is so many fun things to talk about here.
Yeah.
So may I first make a observation?
Of course.
The first part of the question, in which there are sort of three in here, but the first of which is, how is it logical that God could die? And immediately my mind goes to the fact that it is entirely illogical. much like a lot of the value that I find in the Bible and just broader theological concepts, that I feel like the power in a lot of it is precisely its illogicalness. Because if it was logical, then we would sort of just be relying on our own earthly knowledge, and it would be sort of a math equation or, something that we could comprehend. And to me, it's the incomprehensibleness of God and God's ways that strike the awe in me that I really value. And so, the question, how is it logical that God could die? I would say it is not logical. And that may be the most powerful aspect of it to me.
Yeah.
Because, it's a beautiful thing when God's ways are not our ways, and so often they simply make no sense whatsoever. But that does drive some people crazy. Not to assume it drives Bo crazy, but it certainly drives a lot of people crazy.
Yeah.
And I do, against all odds, consider myself a fairly logical person, which may be why I have learned to appreciate and sort of swim in the absurdity of the illogic of a lot of things about God.
Yeah. And I think it's important here, too, to draw a distinction just for people who might be kind of wondering where you're going. But for something to be illogical, like you said, does not mean that it's impossible.
Yes.
So to say that something is illogical, that doesn't mean
Or
it can't happen. It just means it really doesn't make sense that it happened.
Or, yeah. Yes, great point.
So, it's kind of, you could ask the question like this: how does it make sense that God could die or should die? And then your answer, I think, was right. It doesn't make sense.
Well,
but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. It did happen, but it doesn't
Sure.
make any sense.
Yeah, and think of the value put on logic is a fairly new thing. It's very Western, it's very modern, and it's very, in the age of science, logic is its own sort of form of God. It's its own sacrament, almost, when it comes to modern ways of thinking. And so I think the modern man really does have a reverence for logic, our own special reverence for things to make logical sense. And not that logic is bad, and I would never discourage logic in almost every situation, except for when it comes to divine things that are simply inherently and axiomatically above our understanding. And sometimes the illogic turns a lot of people off to God things. A lot of people base their entire atheism or agnosticism on the fact that there are so many illogical things about it. I am just one of those people that it's exciting when something is illogical. It speaks to something deeper. I guess when it's illogical, it can speak truth that logic almost can't reach, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, I think that there is something to be said about the fact that there is so much in the person and nature of God that defies our understanding, and we can do, a little more than call it illogical, but it goes back to that kind of, something of almost a trope about, if you could understand God, then, he wouldn't be God. So obviously there are going to be parts of who he is and how he operates that go outside the bounds of our understanding and things that we could define with logic. And there is certainly a sense in which the death of God meets that criteria of being illogical. But then on the other hand, there really is something logical about the fact that God died, something that actually does make sense about it. And when you consider, you're talking about God, a Trinitarian God, and then you take that one person of the Trinity, Jesus, who is God. When I speak in terms of the Trinity, I do my best to. When you say God, you're referring to all three persons. So a lot of people, when they say God, they're referring specifically to the Father, but the Father by the Trinitarian sense is the Father, and then the Son, and then the Holy Spirit, and they are all God. And sometimes in calling the Father God, we forget that Jesus is equally just as much God. So anyhow, Jesus, the human I always have to be very careful. I want to say part, but he's not a part. He is God. He's God in human form, but that human form died, and it was necessary because it was humanity that owed a debt. It was humanity that had been separated from the Father, from God. And Jesus' life and ministry was all about, his mission here on earth was all about bringing humanity back to good standing with the Father. So in so doing, the penalty for our sin is death, and Jesus, in order to take away that penalty, and then this, of course, is not physical death, and this kind of ties into this third question that he has here, which is also a great point, which we're working our way down to it, but
yeah, if I may, real quick, in this second, so you were referring to the second part of the question, which is, if all existence is contingent upon God, then wouldn't everything cease to be if God died? And I think for me, the key in that question is the word died or death, the concept of death. Mm-hmm. And again, in the sort of modern Western world, we our very logical scientific frameworks for everything. Death is very particular. It is a very particular, has very particular definition, has very particular connotations as an end, as a ceasing, an end. And so when you think like, yes, if God died, if God ended, wouldn't everything end? And that would be the logical route to take. But if you think of died as, if you take Jesus's death as sort of an example or a definition of what death might, a more accurate description of death, it's more of like a change in state almost. Not a simple ceasing of existence or consciousness, but a change in realm almost, or so that, I'm trying to not use words that might be too sort of hocus pocus, but it really is sort of almost a transfer from one realm of existence to another, rather than some sort of ceasing of existence or consciousness.
Yeah, and it's really it's interesting that we're having this discussion, because I have been talking with a couple people here and there kind of about hell and the nature and reality of hell, and one of those had to do with they were getting some feedback on the last episode when we had discussed hell, and another one was actually our friends over there at Fire Theft had sent me an interview that they did where they had someone on the show. I can't honestly remember the guy's name right now. I think it was Chris Dunn. Actually, I think episode 33. I remember that because it was episode 33. And you guys can go listen to it. But he's trying to make an argument for annihilationism, which is to say that when you go to hell, it's not eternal torment, but you're thrown into the lake of fire, and essentially you're burned up. Your soul is incinerated. You cease to exist. Yeah. And we talk about death in those terms, and I like the way that you just explained death, that it's not necessarily that you're ceasing to exist, but it's kind of a changing of state. And it is, we perhaps will have an episode where we can talk about annihilationism, and there's been a lot of people.
I think it's a compelling theory. Or,
it is.
A compelling concept.
It is, and I've heard the arguments.
There's Hebrew arguments. There's ancient Hebrew, precedent, I guess, for annihilationism.
There are.
but-
Most of it is contingent, though, upon a person's understanding of what death is. And if you think that death is the seizure of your existence, then perhaps eternal death, when they're talking about it in those terms, is that you just die forever. You cease to be eternally. However,
and perhaps both could be the case. There could be two types of death, as the Bible already describes two. Perhaps there is, another.
Yeah. So we can open up that can of worms that dieth not later. But
yeah, we will.
But yeah.
But I do also want to just throw on a layer on top of that, using the life and death of Jesus as sort of the standard for what this word, death or died might mean, as sort of the change of state. And you can also consider Jesus's birth. The birth of Jesus was not the coming into the first time Jesus had come into existence. Biblically, Jesus existed before his human birth. And, depending on who you're talking to, some might say that we existed before our human birth.
Yeah.
And so when you put those together, if birth it was a change of state and entering into the world, then death would simply be a change of state exiting this realm of existence. And so I think the idea of God dying, specifically in the context of Jesus dying, is logically consistent with the standards set biblically, or at least in the case of Jesus.
Yeah, and of course it is. I mean, I think we all understand that. I think that we do, that it was his physical body that died, and we all have, spirits, souls, whichever term you want to use, but we have a part of us that is other than our physical container, as did Jesus when he died, when his body was laid in the grave. It didn't kill his soul. It didn't destroy his soul. So even when his body died, of course, he didn't cease to be. Bo obviously knows this, but for discussion for people, because it is kind of a quandary sometimes. But when you die, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So even when we die, we don't cease to be. So if God dies, in the person of Jesus, he hasn't ceased to be. So nothing is wrong with creation, and it can all continue. So that is, kind of the answer to that question. And then the third part of it, if it was only Jesus' human nature, which I just said, that died, then would any sinless man be an acceptable sacrifice for our sins? And to that, I would say yes. Any sinless man would be an acceptable sacrifice for our sins. But
that is so
there was only one.
Yeah. No, you know what, Chris? You continue to surprise me, even after these long, grueling 15 episodes of knowing one another. I did not think that I thought you'd have a much more drawn out answer to sort of defend the fact that it is only Jesus. Jesus was the only possibility. But I agree with you. I believe in the standards set forth in the Bible, any sinless man would have done. But the problem with that is there never was, and there never has been one since.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a non-question. But I do appreciate the consideration of the question.
I mean, I would suppose too, like, so say there was a person. I mean, if we're speculating at the thought of something that is impossible, but if someone was born, and if they somehow did not have sin passed on to them from their father Adam, and of course that is what's really interesting with Jesus' birth, that he was immaculately conceived, and that the seed was not involved. So the seed of sin coming from the father wasn't involved in that process. And then of course he never shares any blood with his mother, and that's of course all babies and those sorts of things. So he can actually be incubated there entirely apart from human existence, yet still born through a woman, not sharing any of that sinful nature. So, but if you were able to somehow, if you were immaculately conceived, then you would be God. So if you were able to be born without sin somehow, you would essentially reach the level of deification, and I suppose that you could go in and make intercession. You would have right, if you were sinless, to approach the throne, which we will all be given right after our sins are forgiven, and we go into glory, where we then actually can walk up to the throne and presumably make intercession on behalf of other people. But yeah, the fact of the matter is that it's just impossible for it to happen.
There is a little bit of a wrinkle in that I think you just pointed out, but if I may articulate myself, yes, but if there were another sinless human that could someone could come in and say, a baby is sinless, a newborn baby is sinless, and now you're getting into some Moloch baby sacrifice territory, which would be problematic. So it almost does require original sin, the sort of inherent sinful nature of a newborn, to make that distinction. I'm confusing myself now. I'm getting rattled. I'm rattling myself.
I mean, we are considering something that is illogical, so it doesn't
because in that case, like you said, it would require immaculate conception. To avoid. Now, of course,
essentially, yes, it would.
The concept of original sin is its own deep, dark theological discussion, which I'm not necessarily prepared to get into here. Where do you stand on that, Chris?
On what?
Original sin.
Where do I stand on it?
Is a newborn baby a sinner?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it did need to be Jesus then.
But it's an interesting conversation, and one that I'll just throw out there just so that people don't think that I'm, condemning infants to hell.
Babies.
I do believe in age of accountability, if you will, and I don't think that is a particular age that happens, like when you turn 5 or whatever. And very interestingly, too, your age kind of depends on where you're born, because I believe it's in China. They actually start to count your age from your date of conception.
I'm not sure about China, but I do know Korea does that.
Is it Korea? Thank you.
You are 1 year old.
That's what it is.
And it gets even crazier. You are 1 year old on the day you are born, and then you turn 2 on the New Year's of your first year.
Yeah.
So if you were born on, December 30th, you'd be 1, and then the next day you would be 2 years old.
Yeah. So the age of accountability, if you're Korean, that really doesn't work in your favor too well. But I don't think that it is an age, but I think that there is a point of accountability, and it's really an interesting discussion. And when you think about it, it kind of struck me one time. We were at the beach, and I saw this kid running across the beach, like a little 2, maybe 3 years old or something, able to run just naked, running from his parents, just down the beach, just running naked, not a care in the world, laughing and giggling and stuff. And I just thought to myself, I was like, it's so crazy that kid, he just doesn't even care. He has no shame. And then I started thinking to myself, I said, oh, he does have no shame. He is actually just like Adam and Eve in the garden at this point. He is innocent. There is nothing for him to be ashamed of. He's not ashamed of his nakedness, because he doesn't have any conception of his guilt yet. And I think that it's when we start becoming aware of our nakedness, because it happens to every one of us at some point or another. We start to realize, oh, wow, it is shameful for me to be naked in front of people. When that starts to happen and you start to have that recognition of sin and shame in your life, that, I believe, is when a person starts to become accountable to the Lord for their sin. But before that, you can't put a stamp on it, but for people who are parents and for me soon to be one, I would say that's probably the time to start really having gospel conversations with your kids. I mean, hopefully you're having them all along, but when they get to that point, when they start to be ashamed of being naked and they don't just walk out of the bathroom naked anymore when you have company over or whatever, but they start actually having recognition of that, I believe that's the time when kids start to become accountable. But yes, they are sinful from birth. They don't have to do something, to be sinners. They are born sinners, inherited from their parents. So that's my take on it, for what it's worth.
Well, hope that all answers your question, Bo. Thank you.
Thanks, Bo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bo. That was, okay.
That's a fun talk.
Yeah. Okay, shall we take another question from the audience?
Let's do it.
Okay. This one came in from one of our supporters, Learbag, and he is in Iowa.
Should we mention his other contributions to the show?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah, he's been helping us out with some of those nice musical stings. Is that what you call them?
For the Death of God series, those are full songs, really.
Okay, full songs.
He's a great
stings.
Composer.
Yeah,
he has helped out with all sorts of other great audio artistic work on my other shows, and he's the best. Thank you very much, Learbag.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Got to chat with him a little bit. Great guy, and just super thankful. I on late notice said, "Hey man, I really just need a song. Can you just put it together?" And he got it together, nailed it. So thank you so much for your help, buddy.
And thank you for the question that goes like this. I've been asked by a friend of mine who I would classify as agnostic, a very intriguing question, and one that also struck a chord with me prior to coming to Christ, seeing as I was also very agnostic. The question is as follows. If God is so powerful that he can create the entire universe, if he operates outside of time and is the one being that was never created by anything else, why would he need to create Jesus for our salvation? Is he alone not powerful enough to forgive us for our sins? If that is the case, how can we believe he is the Most High? Why did Jesus have to die? Why couldn't God just forgive us? Yeah, but this is... I have also been asked this question by many atheist and agnostic or just critical person of general religion and as a whole. And I would say I'll start off, if I may, Chris.
Go for it. Yeah, let's hear it.
What I sort of came to after being asked this pretty much my whole life. I mean, I've been a Christian forever, and, there are certain ages where you have friends that start to really prod you critically about your Christianity, particularly in middle school and high school when, atheism and agnosticism are pretty cool. At least they were in the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Yeah. And it was cool to kind of like try to, logic a Christian into a corner. And this was a very popular question to do so. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't until later that I was able to come to this, and I'm not saying that this is a definitive answer, but it is one that feels right to me. The concept of Jesus being born, brought into this world, living a sinless life, and then being crucified for our sins as a mechanism for salvation, I tend to think that this was not necessarily an inherent need by God from the beginning. I tend to think that this was the way it happened more because it was what we needed. It is almost what we required to understand our place in the universe and to understand the our own not just place, but the mechanism by which we can be reunited and take it seriously. And that it's kind of like a person who's born with a silver spoon in their mouth and never has to work a day in their life and has everything provided to them. And maybe they're born to a family that pretty much guarantees they're going to be a senator someday or or something like that. They usually tend to not be very great people. And it feels like this was the way that God set things up because it's what we needed to truly understand our relationship to God. And so it wasn't that God wanted it to be this way. I don't know, actually, the wants of God in their entirety, but it feels like something that almost we wanted. We wanted blood. We needed blood to understand how forgiveness could be possible in such a grand cosmic scheme. And without it, we would be just sort of like the petulant person who grows up, who could do no wrong and is forever forgiven and needs no intervention to discover their place in the world. I don't know if I'm articulating that in the fullness by which I feel it in my heart, but it at least scratches the surface. I think the blood was something that we needed and we called out for, whether or not we knew we were doing it. But it's what makes sense to me that would be the only option.
Yeah, I actually really, really appreciate what you said there, because you brought in the human kind of component of it. And I think I can get back to this without, I just want to, before, we'll come back to it. We're going to come back to the beginning part of the question. I'm going to stick with this thought right now just to keep everything kind of cohesive here. But you were talking about the fact that humanity wanted it. And I think that this is a component that sometimes we don't think about, that the cross is actually, it is Jesus' physical death on the cross. So the cross itself, like when people are talking about why did Jesus have to die like on a cross? The cross was an instrument created by human beings, right? And to be able to inflict the greatest amount of pain over the longest amount of time, it was the most horrible form of death. And of course, anybody who's looked into the details of it and how it works, and the suffocation and all of just the torment of the whole thing, it was
sort of an instrument of justice. It was originally an instrument of justice for someone who deserved something so bad that we had the most gruesome instrument with which to bring justice to their actions.
Right. And this all, you see this very interestingly in all of the Passion accounts, and in Matthew. I just pulled it up in Matthew 27, and Pilate is trying to, he's going to release one of the prisoners, and do you want Jesus or Barabbas? There's something really incredible going on here, but I'm going to save it for when we get to Easter, because this whole scene right here with Pilate and Jesus and Barabbas is mind-blowing when you look at it. I can't wait to get to it, but we're not doing it right now. But then they ask for Barabbas to be released, and then Pilate says, well, then what? This is Matthew 27:22. What will I do then with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Pilate asked, and they all said, crucify him. The people asked that Jesus be crucified. It was their idea. And then he said, why? What crime has he committed? But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. Crucify him. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took the water and he washed his hands in front of the crowd, and he said, I'm innocent of this man's blood. And he said, it is your responsibility. And all the people answered, his blood is on us and on our children. And there's something incredibly poetic and ironic going on with the statement that those people made. His blood be on us. And the blood of Jesus is on all of us. In one way or another, it either saves us or it damns us. And the way that these people are calling for it's the way in which almost certainly they're going to be damned. But the cross then is what it is it is actually man's wrath against God It is man rebelling against God, Jesus coming down, God, like we just talked about, to this earth, showing himself to humanity for all that he is. This is who I am. This is, if you have seen me, Jesus said, you've seen the Father. Here I am your God. And all of the people said, we don't want you. We don't like you. We don't want you, God. So they took their wrath out on God, put him on the cross, killed him on the cross, while at the same time, God, the Father in heaven, was administering his wrath against humanity in Jesus. So Jesus' deity is being attacked by humanity, and Jesus' humanity is being, if you can say attacked, it is being, there's probably a better way that I could contrast the two of these things, but Jesus' humanity is being judged by the Father. So he's basically receiving it kind of from both sides on the cross, and that's kind of, the beautiful picture of it with the one, vertical beam and the other horizontal beam. You have this kind of two-way sort of whatever judgment or wrath that's taking place there. And it really is interesting. So I like the point that you brought up there about, it being something that mankind wanted. But I think kind of for me, the answer to this question is it's like right there in the question, because people ask this question all the time. If God is so powerful, and he asked this question too. We're going to go back to it. We're going to save that as the footnote. We're going to go all the way back, reverse through this. But then why can't he just forgive everyone? And this is the point I think that so many people miss, that is what he was doing when he died on the cross. He was just forgiving everyone. The fact of the matter is that, and I think we talked about this when we had Solomon McConan on, and we were talking about it kind of in a legal sense. But when someone is wronged, there is always someone has to suffer a loss. So if you put it in the simplest terms, I steal $20 from you and you say, I forgive you, then what that means is your $20 is still gone. So you have suffered a loss in that. And it's the same way with God. When we sin against God, when we offend God, there's a loss that takes place. There's something that takes place between us and God where there's an offense that's happened. And God, he does just forgive us. But in so doing, he has to take all of that offense and put it on himself. And this is the thing that we don't realize. People don't realize the gravity and the weight of your sin and the full consequence of sinning against a righteous God. And that is what was taking place on the cross. We think it's excessive. We think it's extreme. But that is the penalty of your sin, and that is what it can't just be washed away. Otherwise, God becomes illogical. Then there is no rhyme or reason for him to have a law to say this is right and this is wrong, because if he's just going to wipe the whole law away, then there's no purpose for it anyway. So when we offend the law, we sin against him, he takes that on himself, and he does just forgive us, but in so doing, he has to shoulder all of that on himself.
And again, that's what we want. Like, again, going back to the Solomon McConan episode, I told the story about someone who's very much agnostic or even full-on atheist and complaining about this exact thing. And I mentioned to them, some people believe in universalism, where everybody's going to heaven no matter what. Just because wasn't trying to get into whatever. That's just what the moment called for. He was at an event. There's people all around. I'm not trying to get into a shouting match or some big thing with this person, which has happened in the past. So honestly, I was just trying to avoid the confrontation. So I just mentioned some people believe in universalism. There's a sort of a history of universalism within certain parts of Christianity, and that just everybody goes to heaven. And she responds with, well, does that mean Hitler goes to heaven? Yeah. And I was like, well, yeah. And right there was the moment where it's just you don't like the way it's set up with Jesus's crucifixion. You also don't like the concept that everybody gets to go to heaven. We all get forgiven, because something within you is crying out for justice for Hitler. Of course, your atheistic, agnostic, secular humanism, it does not, continues to cry out for justice for Hitler, which means, going to hell no matter what. And that is the that's the root of like what we as human beings desire. We crave blood for injustice, and you can see it throughout throughout history, not just ancient Hebrews, which had this scapegoat ritual, which was then mirrored in the Jesus crucifixion, but also, I mean, in ancient cultures forever. Always were sacrificing people and animals, and blood is the currency of justice for human beings and always has been. So what other option could there have been for a God trying to reconcile people back to him than speak in the language of justice that they already speak, which is blood?
Yeah.
And so there's no, he could have, I do believe he could have done anything. He could have done whatever he wanted. But I believe, forced God's hand with like, you know what? We don't understand you. We don't get you. Show us the blood, and then we'll understand how to reconcile the injustices going on, and including our own sin.
Well, and it is not only is a testament to justice, but it's a testament to love too. Because I mean, obviously, that's what maybe not obviously, but that is one of the largest components of what the cross was it was love. There's no greater love than a man has than that he should lay down his life for his friends. And not even. I mean, we were enemies of God at that point too. So yeah, it was a great act of love, a great act of justice. But I think it's when you talk about the demand for blood, it is interesting because the band Thrice, who I love Thrice, not their most recent album. I think they just put out one here in the last month or so, but on the one previous to that, they have a song called Blood on Blood. And he basically goes and he's talking about how all these people, these nations and people have been back and forth trying to, meet justice. So someone kills someone, well, then we have to go kill someone back. Even in our legal systems, if someone commits a murder, well, then they have to die, capital punishment, that sort of thing. And he's giving all of these circumstances of blood on blood, and then there's this refrain in the song where he says, "We need a better blood on blood." And of course, he's talking about the blood of Jesus that covers all of these things. And that's what's so funny is that people are right when they demand justice, but they also are right when they demand this certain amount of forgiveness. But the only way that makes any sense is from the Christian worldview. The only way that you can look at a person who is a murderer and say, you deserve not to die, is because that price has already been paid by Jesus. So you can't even, you can't make the claim that this person should be forgiven unless Jesus dies. And that's why when we were talking about, I think on the Rollins episode, I said that I think if I found myself there at Jesus' trial and where I just read and I was in the crowd, one way or the other, you have to find yourself saying, Jesus has to die.
Right.
Like, I might not be happy about it, but he has to die. It's the only way. It's the only way that if he doesn't die, we're all doomed. And if he can do it and he can still, come out on the other side clean as he did, then will you please carry that burden for me? Will you please do that for me in order that I might be with you? And that is the only way that it makes any sense. The beginning of this question, though, I don't want to skip over, because if people were paying attention carefully, there was something kind of in the verbiage of this, and I don't know if this was kind of Gabe's. He says it's a question from his friend, so I don't know where he stands on this or if he understands even what happened here in the question, but it says, if God is so powerful that he can create the entire universe, which he did, and if he operates outside of time, and is the one being who was never created by anything else, and we agree that God is the one being that was never created by anything else, then he says, then why would he need to create Jesus for salvation? And right there, that's again that kind of distinction sometimes that people make unknowingly, that Jesus was not created. Jesus is God as much as the Father is God. Jesus was always eternally there. Jesus is creator of the whole universe. He operates outside of time. Jesus is the one being, just like God who was not created. So I didn't want to just let that slide by without addressing the fact that we do not believe that Jesus was created. Jesus was sent by the Father to the earth, and he inhabited a human form, but that was not his creation. That was simply his incarnation, how he came to the earth. If you talk about Jesus being created, that's getting into a realm, and this is when we were differentiating our dogmas and our doctrines and our beliefs. This is a dogma. You must affirm that Jesus is eternal, that he was not created. If you say that Jesus is created, this is hearkening back to a heresy back from the late 200s, early 300s, known as Arianism, which said that Jesus was a created being. Actually, Arianism still kind of persists today in Mormonism and in even with the Jehovah's Witnesses, where they believe that Jesus is a created being, that he's not eternal, that God created Jesus sometime later. And they'll use very, theological language that Jesus was created ex nihilo, that he was created sinless, that he was created all of these things. But the fact of the matter is they're saying he was created and they don't believe that he's eternal. So it's a big deal that it's phrased like that. So I just didn't want to let that go and have some listeners, catching that and being like, oh, they didn't say anything about the fact he said Jesus was created. Jesus was not created. He's eternal. Just wanted to clear that up and cover ourselves here. We believe that Jesus was eternal.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, funny. I did not even notice that part of it. Yeah, very good. Okay. Well, did we not answer the question?
I think we not answered it.
Good. We accomplished it again. Awesome. Well, thank you to both of our question askers. That's Learbag and Bo. And look at that. We're past an hour, Chris.
We did it. It's past my bedtime now, too.
I know. It's just so sleepy around here. And I'm surprised my voice has held up so well. I'm kind of fighting some sort of strep or something. Don't worry, everybody. I took a little antigen test thingy or whatever it's called. Does not look more serious than that. But
it's not the Omicron?
Not the Omicron has not come for your buddy. Omicron is afraid to come into this home.
Stay safe out there, people.
Yeah. Omicron's coming for you. So, what do you think? Do we have anything else to do or say in regards to this episode?
Well, I have lots of things to do and say that are not in regards to this episode. So we do appreciate, I do just want to say that we are getting lots of questions, and we have some still from like before even our first asked and answered, and they are getting cataloged, and we are getting to them. We were trying to keep these ones specifically related to the death of God, so there are several more, and we have seen them, and be patient with us, and we'll get to them. We might have to start doing these asked and answered a little more frequently to get through all of them, but we do have a list that's piling up. But the thing that's nice is that there are some that are overlapping now, so we're getting some of the same sorts of questions, so we'll be able to address kind of multiples all at the same time, I think, which will be really good. Maybe even create an entire episode on one particular topic that we've received several questions about. So just wanted to let everybody know. They're like, ooh, another asked and answered, maybe they got to mine, and then we didn't. It's coming. We just kept these ones strictly related to the death of God, but those other ones are on the docket.
Amen. And keep the questions coming. Don't feel like they're piling up. I'm not gonna send one in. No. Keep it coming, baby. So yeah, okay. Now we were originally sort of planning for this to be the end of the Death of God series, and perhaps it is the end of this part of the series, but I can guarantee pretty much that we will return to the topic sometime in the future, but we'll probably let it steep for a little bit, so don't be sad. But yes, I'm looking forward to moving forward and talking about more things. Got some more guests lined up, and if there's any guests that you guys really want us to talk to, or topics that you would like us to talk to the guest about, or just hear Chris and I talk about between the two of us. Whatever the case may be, we are totally open to suggestions and appreciate you guys sticking with us and continuing to tell people about the podcast. That always helps. People are always looking for more new, regularly dropping podcasts. So if there's someone in your life who you think might enjoy the types of conversations we have here, please let them know about it. And of course, just as our Christmas present this year, please go leave some ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts specifically, and follow us on social media, all that good fun stuff, because we will be back, baby. All right, Chris, any last words?
Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to Ravel. To learn more about who we are, what we believe, or how to support this ministry, visit our website at ravelpodcast.com. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, or to let us know how we're doing, email us at contact@ravelpodcast.com. This project is made possible by the prayers and generosity of listeners just like you.
Yes.
Sorry. I didn't know you were ready to go.